Hi, and welcome to our first Training on Demand episode. We're going to have short, little training classes. Some of those will be, just a virtual classroom. Some of those will discuss administrative topics. Some will discuss operational topics. So they'll be a little bit different. We're going to try to put these out midweek, and hopefully it's something that's a little more substantial than the other stuff we're doing. So let's get right into this week's Training on Demand, which has to do with leading groups of people. We spend a lot of time talking in the fire service and around the kitchen table and outside of the kitchen table and so forth about solving problems. And I start this conversation about dealing with groups of people with a problem-solving triangle. It really doesn't matter to me what your issue is. It has been my experience and training which tells me, and we understand why we use a triangle as a symbol, because if you break one leg, nothing stands. So we start talking about, if you have a problem, it's probably got to do with equipment, procedures, or people. And that's what we're talking about today, is the people piece. But I don't care if this is a building problem, a station problem, a training problem. It really doesn't matter what it is. If you stop and think about it, you will find that one of these things has failed if you have discovered a problem. This information can be helpful for after-action reports, critiques of incidents. Is your training successful? What happened on the last job, the last emergency incident that you went out to? All of these things come into play, and you should look closely at these things if you're trying to figure out and solve a problem. The other thing we want to talk about is groups of people. Your fire department, the XYZ fire department, that's a group. Your fire department might belong to a regional mutual aid system. That's a group. You're a global member of the fire service, Canadian Fire Service, whatever fire service. You're a global member of that. But what I want you to do, instead of looking upward and outward, I want you to look internally. When we start figuring out that the subgroup of what we have, that is, we think that we have a department and that's a group, we think that's something, what I want you to do is look a lot closer. Do you have men and women? Do you have paramedics and firefighters? Do you have older members and younger members? Do you have members who live within the community, members who live without of the community? Do you have some certified members and some members not certified? Do you have a gap in the middle of your department? There's all sorts of things that you can look at when you start defining groups. We can get down into religious beliefs. We can get down into all sorts of things here. But I really suggest that you do, maybe right after this training, what I think you should do is get a blank sheet of paper and start kind of defining the groups that are within your department. And when you begin to look at it with a microscope, like I'm asking you to do, what you're going to find is that you will figure out the way to best lead these groups, but you can't lead them if you don't even think of them as individual groups. And I think that's critical. I think looking at the small breakdown of groups within your organization will help you as an officer, certainly help you as a firefighter, to understand others. This job would be great if we didn't get tangled up with people problems, and I joke about that, obviously, but people are our business. That's who we interact with. Chief Brunacini many years ago had this thing of SOPs, and one of the SOPs was be nice, and that was to include the people that you work with, and I think that's important. So when you have an organizational problem that's cropping up, my suggestion would be start breaking down, literally on a piece of paper, write down the different types of groups, and you'll start to get an understanding of how you can best lead them and work this organization to your benefit. Couple of things, and we're talking about that, and that's where we're going here. So let's talk about it. This is a project. I'll just explain this briefly, but this is something. This is your homework assignment. What I want you to do is take a look at this and Google this after the fact, and that is the Morris-Massey theory. And what this theory is, this is not Maslow's theory. This is Morris-Massey's theory, and the basis of this is he says in brief, and I do mean in brief, that all people are, your value system was formed when you were 10 years old. So whatever was going on in the world when you were 10 years old, that's how your value system is formed. And I think that, there's some merit to that when you think about it. Think about that yourself as you listen to this. What was going on in the world? How were you brought up when you were 10 years old? What was your life like when you were 10 years old? And so what do we care? How does that work? Well, just think about something. I use this example often, is in a volunteer organization. There's a vote tonight at the meeting, at the organization meeting. There's a vote tonight. And the vote is, are we going to buy a 52-inch plasma TV or LED TV or OLED TV or whatever we're doing? Well, how do you think that vote's going to go? Looking at your organization, how do you think that vote's going to go? Well, I'm going to suggest that some of the older members are going to vote against it, and some of the new members are going to vote for it. Now, does that, is that an absolute? No, it's probably not an absolute. I'm sure it's not. But I think what I'm saying is that the older members probably grew up in an era where money was not so free, where people mattered more and things mattered less. The younger generation, a little bit different. And I'm not saying what's right or wrong here. I'm just suggesting that the point of view might be different. And the point of view is that, get us something nice. That's what we have. We want, we'll put a game on it. We'll put, whatever the modern game is that they can use for gaming or so forth. So when you start, and this is what I talked about earlier in a previous note about understanding the groups. If you understand how people generally will think and how that will work, then I think that you've got a shot of helping make decisions and trying to figure things out. Could we sell that project now? The buying the big TV sounds simple, but could we do that? Yeah, we could do that. Hey, listen, you know what? If we, you older members, you say nobody's hanging around the station like they did in the old days, Well, if we put a big gaming system in, we'd have folks here every night, and there'd be more people hanging around, and so on and so forth. And I might just interject. I mean, these discussions take place in career departments too. You got a career department with 3 platoons or 3 groups, and one group wants to do something and the other 2 may not. We are subsets of ourselves, and understanding the subsets will help us better lead a cohesive group as we start to break up the individual pieces. Here's where we get wrapped around the axle a little bit. The mission. I'm not talking about the mission statement. What is it we're trying to do here? What is it we're here for? We're here to serve the public. We're here to provide levels of emergency services. We're here to do all of those things. And that's what the mission is. As these little microcosm groups form, they form their own little mission. What's in it for them? What's in it for the benefit of that small group? What's in it for those that will benefit most out of something? I like to think that your department is a plane. You're all passengers on an airplane. And if any of you have flown recently, seats are getting tighter. They're stuffing more and more people on there. The process of flying is getting tougher and tougher. And you notice how disruptive it is when one person or 5 people on a plane start acting in a way that's crazy. That might be the child who misbehaves. That might be the person who has one too many cocktails. All of those things can make the entire plane miserable for the remainder of the people. And you know, when you think about my analogy, isn't that what goes on in a lot of organizations? The small minority may be making the rest of, it may be upsetting the cabin there in the plane. The other thing that I use the plane analogy for is we hear so many times, follow social media to any degree, so many times you hear the morale in this place is awful, the chief's an idiot. I've been a chief for a lot of years. I've been called an idiot by professionals and amateurs alike. The fact is, why do you want to shoot the pilot? If your department is an airplane and the chief and deputy is the pilot and co-pilot, why are we trying to, wouldn't it be better, wouldn't it be easier if everybody on that plane was behaving according to the norms, behaving according to the way things ought to be, and everybody would have a better flight? I think that we sometimes lose sight of this, and I think it makes good sense if we kind of just reflect on that. That's the purpose of this small presentation this morning. Just reflect on the fact that, you know what, we're all on the same plane. Let's not make it uncomfortable for the rest. Unless, of course, that's your intention. You know, part of my presentation is the fact that, you know what, every organization has mean people. Every organization has people whose intention it is to make the flight miserable. If that's the case, you know, pull the slide and let them out. But the fact is, we need to think more and more of a group. Now, sure, on a plane, what do you got? First class and coach. You know, there's subgroup in the cockpit, so there's in the flight crew. You know, there's 4 groups without even trying, even on a plane. So think about your department in groups. Think about how we can make this a little bit better. And hopefully by understanding groups and understanding where they're coming from, and I do hope that you look up the Massey thing and learn a little bit about what he said about you are what your value system was formed when you were 10 years old. Listen, I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to get your questions about anything we talked about in this little session. Do you like them? Is it the right length? Tell me something about it. I'd love to hear from you. If there is a topic you'd like a small little training on demand section, then please feel free. Send me an email, get back to me. I'd be happy to help you in some way.